but it's like holding a man underwater and saying, why don't you swim? It's pretty hard to swim if you're being held underwater, or it's shackling a fellow to a post and saying, why don't you run? In other words, we have created a kind of social situation where discrimination bears upon a person because of his color 1,000 times a day. He can't do this, he can't do that. He's lacked many things that we take for granted, or our youngsters take for granted. And therefore, you cannot put all these inhibitions around a person and then say, why don't you try harder? What we have to do is create what this country has stood for everyone, is equality of opportunity. Now, what happens after that, of course, is an individual's own personal responsibility, but not to have equality of opportunity, then to blame someone for not performing better is putting the cart before the horse.
Please welcome Jim Sullivan from the class of 1993. Jim's call to serve led him to found the Lab for Economic Opportunities, fondly referred to as LEO, here at the University of Notre Dame.
Equality of opportunity. That's a concept that I had no idea what it meant when I arrived on campus as a freshman 34 years ago. You see, I'm the youngest of 12 kids. That meant that there were times when there was little left for me at the dinner table. It meant that I always wore hand-me-down clothes, and it meant that I often had to find my own way home from Little League practice because my parents forgot to pick me up. So growing up, I had it rough, or so I thought. Eventually, over time, I realized that I had been afforded a wealth of opportunities. I had two parents that raised me in a loving and nurturing environment, and I had 11 older siblings that made a lot of mistakes that I could learn from, and they paved the path to where I am today. They all graduated college, and 5 of them here at Notre Dame, and they instilled in me at a very early age a love for this place. I went to my first Notre Dame football game when I was 6, and attended my first off-campus party when I was 7. But it wasn't until I was back here as a student that I came to realize what Father Ted meant when he said, there are those that are shackled to a post and asked to run. In my sophomore year, I signed up for the Big Brother, Big Sister program. And I was matched with my little brother, Sean. There's never been a happier kid that you've ever met. And when he came to campus, he would bubble over with excitement when we would go to the dining hall or play pool in La Fortune or just hang out in the dorms. My friends loved him. He was a bit of a celebrity in Alumni Hall. But I'll never forget the first time I went to Sean's house. There was a bullet hole in his front door, and his parents heated the house with the oven. I had never seen living conditions like that before, and his dad was out of the picture, and his mom was struggling with addiction. Sean had been given very few of the opportunities that I took for granted as a kid. And it was no surprise then, no wonder that he eventually dropped out of high school and got caught up in the criminal justice system. Now, fortunately, there's a happy ending to Sean's story. While he was incarcerated, he had access to high school and college classes. He completed his GED and earned his bachelor's degree in business administration from Ball State. But watching Sean navigate all these challenges in his life, I couldn't help but wonder, can we do better? How can we create that equality of opportunity that Father Ted said was what this country stands for? So fast forward 2 decades, and I find myself as a professor of economics here at Notre Dame, teaching and conducting research to address these very questions. Now, I never imagined that studying ways to promote equality of opportunity would be my life's work. So how did that happen? Maybe it was just luck, but I think there's something more to it than that. If you hang around this campus long enough, remarkable things happen. So you see, one day in 2011, I had a chance meeting with the leaders of Catholic Charities USA. They shared with me and my colleague, Bill Evans, their new vision for fighting poverty. Rather than addressing the symptoms of poverty and providing temporary relief, They wanted to address the root causes. But to do that, you need to know what works and what doesn't. You need evidence. So we wondered, could academics work with these organizations to build that evidence? So we agreed to run a bit of an experiment. Catholic Charities USA would bring to Notre Dame the most innovative leaders from their network of 180 local agencies. And for our part, Bill and I would invite the leading academics studying poverty, domestic poverty, from universities across the country. We'd put them in a room and see what happens. And what we learned from that experiment is that most anti-poverty programs are motivated by stories rather than evidence. Now, nonprofits are very interested in creating stronger evidence, but they have little capacity. But we also discovered that researchers are also interested in working with these nonprofits to generate that evidence. Realizing that we may have stumbled onto something big here, Bill and I did what any Notre Dame faculty would do in this situation. We called on Father Ted. So, of course, he invited us to his office on the 13th floor of the library, and we shared with him this idea we had where we would work with Catholic Charities and other nonprofit organizations to identify innovative solutions to poverty. He could not have been more supportive. Even at 95, he still had this gift of being able to instill hope in people and to convince them, yes, you really can change the world. And he said to us, this is exactly what the world's preeminent Catholic university should be doing. So with Father Ted's blessing, there was no looking back. And shortly after that meeting, Bill and I launched the Wilson Sheehan Lab for Economic Opportunities, or LEO. Let me share with you an example of our work. So the Goodwill Excel Center program is designed to improve outcomes for one of the most disadvantaged groups in this country, those who failed to get their high school degree. Most dropouts live in poverty. They earn 70% less than those with just a high school degree, and their children are twice as likely to be dropouts themselves. The Excel Center addresses these challenges by providing a program that allows adults to obtain their high school degree, access post-secondary credentials, and importantly, they're supported by a mentor and other wraparound services. So does the Excel Center permanently lift individuals out of poverty? Leo studied this program and showed that Excel Center graduates make 40% more than similar adults who don't complete the program. It costs $9,000 per Excel Center graduate, but the increase in earnings generates tax revenue that more than offsets this cost, resulting in cost savings for the government. But most importantly, this evidence is being used to enact real change. So we presented these results to the Arizona State Legislature, and it resulted in a change in state laws that allowed Excel Centers to operate there. And earlier this year, the governor of Indiana announced a new $50 million investment to have Excel Centers expand throughout the state, all based on evidence we created showing that the program works. Now, the Excel Center is just one of over 90 programs that Leo has underway. We're working to understand how best to house those that are experiencing homelessness, how best to ensure that at-risk kids finish high school and go on to college, and how best to promote upward mobility for families living in poverty. But we're just getting started because over $250 billion are spent each year in the nonprofit service provider sector, and yet very few programs are backed by hard evidence. Leo aims to change that. And to do that, we need your help. Over half of Leo partners come from referrals from the Notre Dame Alumni Network. Many of you, I'm sure, support local nonprofits or even serve on their boards. We need your help to connect Leo to these organizations. With your help, we can ensure that no kid ever calls home a place with a bullet hole in the front door. We can ensure that no kid is ever shackled to a post and asked to run. Thank you.